Yo, what's going on, people? This is Kno Stylez Media, and we're gonna get into how the game brought the West Coast back in the mid-2000s. When you think of the old school generation of West Coast rappers, you think of Ice-T, Ice Cube, Snoop Dogg, Eazy-E, Too Short, Corrupt, Nate Dogg, even Tupac, even though he was from the East Coast, but you know he repped that West Coast heavy. When you think about the new school, think about artists like Kendrick Lamar, Nipsey Hussle, YG, Tyler Creator. But right in the middle of this list is the rapper Game. You know what I mean? Game is the bridge between the old school and the new school. And he was a breath of fresh air when the West Coast started to die down. We're gonna get right into that. To get into that, we definitely gotta start from the beginning. Hip hop was started in the 1970s in the Bronx and was dominated by the East Coast, with New York being the mecca of hip hop. Other places around the nation was making their mark, but the East Coast was basically in control of this hip hop game until the early mid 90s when West Coast gangster rap was born. Just took over, dominated, with labels like Death Row Records, Lynch Mob Records, Ruthless Records, leading the charge with a message highlighting police brutality, violence in the streets, poverty, and just being treated unfairly, and just took the game by storm, going against the government, the establishment, and being unapologetic in their message and being raw and real. You can contribute that to the Black Panther movement, you know, later turning into the Bloods and Crips. You watch a movie like NWA, it definitely highlight what was going on over there. The West Coast definitely took the game by storm and shocked all of us with just a raw and real message that they were just putting out there. The West Coast gangster rap scene started to die down around the early 2000s, started to do more nightclub music and party music with the birth of the hyphy movement that was starting to take over the Bay Area. The rap lyrics were more about sex, money, and drugs instead of the gangster life that was portrayed in the early days of the West Coast movement. Even though the music stayed very popular on the West Coast, nationwide the West Coast took a back seat in the hip hop game. And when the West Coast needed a lifeline and an identity, here comes Game in the mid-2000s. In 2005, the Game dropped his double platinum album, The Documentary, and put the West Coast back on the map. This was after Game signed with G-Unit, but he would eventually feud with the G-Unit leader 50 Cent, and that feud would spill over into the streets. But because of that feud and some of Game's beefs, we got some classic freestyles from Game going at his former crew and other rappers in the game he just didn't get along with. He was also cool with the Diplomat crew from Harlem, New York, and one of the known members, Jim Jones, who also repped the Bloods. And, you know, they basically, you know, worked on a lot of projects. One of their most known hits in the streets was Certified Gangsters. He also guest appeared on Green Lantern's mixtapes. Game will put out his next project, Doctor's Advocate, in 2006, with debut #1 on US Billboards. He also put out other projects later in his career, but I really feel like the mid-2000s was the golden age for Game. What made Game so special is that I consider Game a lyrical gangster rapper. Now, what does that mean? Game could spit that gangster talk that the West Coast love and also bring them lyrics that the East Coast cherish. I really feel like that combination is what made him so popular and successful, and also what helped him take that torch from the old school and pass it to the new generation. Stars like Kendrick Lamar, the whole TDE crew, Nipsey Hussle, Tyga, YG, Ty Dolla $ign, Blueface, you know, the list goes on. Some of these rappers on this list, like Kendrick Lamar, also helped push the lyrical rap game to the next level, and their lyrical ability is respected on both coasts, just like Game. I want to note that there were other rappers on the West Coast that made their mark when Game was at his peak. You know, rappers like E40, who, you know, came before Game, but also was making his mark during Game's reign. Too Short, who also had hits out, you know, around the mid-2000s. You know, Hobson, who came out around that time. Crooked Eye, Exhibit. Even members of the Dog Pound were still putting out projects, but when the West Coast needed that face to bring them back, I feel like Game's the one who was on the front lines and answered that call. His impact in the game was undeniable, especially when the West Coast needed a shot in the arm. Game brought the West Coast back. Do you agree or disagree? If not the Game, who you think brought the West Coast back to life, or do you feel like the West Coast never left? Voice your opinion in the comment section, and if you respect what I'm saying, like and subscribe.